Hello there, RealBlack1. Regarding your video, gay marriage, even nature is against it. It almost seems as if you saw my last video on this topic and misinterpreted it as an instruction manual for making bad arguments about nature, and then you proceeded to do exactly that. You use the term nature when you really mean God, and you were actually rather open about that, but substituting one word for another when they have very different meanings does not mean your arguments will automatically remain just as valid or invalid as they were before. Indeed, this changes things significantly. You've made statements such as, quote, nature says, nature wants, nature has prescribed, nature is trying to tell us, and nature is very interested. No, your portrayal of the natural world as some kind of conscious, intelligent entity capable of communication is wildly divergent from reality. Nature does not possess intentions or interests of any sort. It lacks the capacity to want things, let alone make explicit statements directed toward us. This precludes the possibility of nature issuing moral declarations or desiring that we follow these morals. And even if it did, why would we be obligated to adopt the morality offered by nature anyway? What would make this a moral system worth following? Do you think nature's going to get pissed off if we don't? Well, that's not going to happen. And nature is not anthropomorphic just because you feel the need to anthropomorphize it. You've also given us many reasons to doubt that you really use the question of, is this natural, as an ethical criterion in your everyday life. In particular, your dismissal of homosexuality among animals as somehow being irrelevant makes it very obvious that you only treat the questions of is this natural and is this moral as one and the same when it gives you the opportunity to condemn something you already take issue with. In fact, homosexuality among animals is highly relevant to any discussion regarding the morality of homosexuality and attempts to derive morality from nature. Animals lack the ability to consider the moral aspects of attraction and sexual activity. They do not have a concept of whether this would be right or wrong, depending on the sex of who they're attracted to. This is simply not something they take into account. Their attractions, tendencies, and behaviors are natural phenomena, not the result of some conscious decision they've made pertaining to sexual orientation. Species such as bison, black swans, bonobos, elephants, giraffes, hyenas, lions, mallards, polecats, and sheep exhibit homosexual behavior, and many of them have lasting same-sex relationships and patterns of homosexual behavior indicative of an enduring sexual preference. And all of this occurs naturally. So how could you possibly claim that homosexuality isn't natural? Why do you only use nature as a source of morality for humans and not animals? Is it perhaps because if you rely on nature for morality, the natural occurrence of homosexuality would directly contradict your assertion that nature is against it? I can see why you want us to ignore that part of nature, the part you don't agree with. You also spoke at length about penises, vaginas, and how well they go together in order to deposit semen in the vagina. Of course, the same could be said of the animals with penises and vaginas who engage in same-sex behavior anyway. And have you ever wondered why the human penis is shaped the way it is? Why did we evolve to have penises with that particular shape? Well, allow me to introduce you to the fascinating strategy of semen displacement. You may have noticed that the head of the penis is separated from the shaft by a flared ridge around the top, and studies have shown that during intercourse, semen is caught behind this ridge and pulled out of the vagina. You might be wondering, how could there be any reproductive advantage to having a penis that removes semen from the vagina? The answer? When it's another man's semen. This indicates that the human penis evolved to account for the fact that people have multiple sexual partners, sometimes in such rapid succession that there's a good chance of encountering the last guy's deposit, at which point it would be beneficial in terms of reproduction to have a penis that will scoop that semen out so you can replace it with your own. It seems nature has very little regard for monogamous marriage or the lifelong commitment to a single partner. If nature had anything to say about marriage, perhaps your video would be more accurate if you had simply titled it, Marriage, Even Nature is Against It. You also asserted that, quote, I agree with nature, I am on the side of nature. I would suggest that if you have to try and present nature as something that has intentions, prescribes morals, and takes sides, just so you can claim you have the support of the natural world itself, this doesn't show a lot of confidence in your arguments. If you have to invent an authority to appeal to, I am not impressed. Finally, you said, quote, "If I was gay, then I would think of every justifiable excuse for the homosexual lifestyle. Why? Because it fits my agenda." Perhaps you failed to realize how incredibly presumptuous it is to assume that anyone has to make excuses for their sexual orientation. We don't answer to you, and we don't need to justify ourselves to you, or anyone, or nature. And if nature has a problem with that, nature can take it up with us, which it will not, because that's not how nature works. And if it wasn't for people like you who spread these baseless, arrogant, malicious claims designed to promote intolerance of people like me, we wouldn't have to take the time to correct your campaign of disinformation. If you object to us pointing out the glaring flaws in the arguments you've decided to use against us, perhaps you shouldn't have made this necessary to begin with. You insist that you, quote, "do not hate gays." But when you're trying to convince people that nature itself is aligned against us just because of who we love, I find it hard to see anything but hate.